They say diplomacy thrives on patience. But what happens when two nuclear neighbors refuse to give each other even that? And what happens when one of the neighbors uses terrorism as an instrument of state policy? From cricket fields to United Nations chambers, the India-Pakistan rivalry has long spilled over into international forums, hijacking agendas and paralyzing progress. In 2025, this old animosity exploded yet again, for obvious reasons, with conflict treaty withdrawals and diplomatic shutdowns pulling global institutions into its orbit. Can the world ever move forward if South Asia's bitterest feud keeps dragging everything backwards? Hello and welcome. You're watching Statecraft with me, Geeta Mohan. In recent years, every effort to build trust between India and Pakistan has unraveled just as quickly as it began. Thanks to one country where the military is at the helm of affairs and where the military prioritizes terrorism over cooperation and progress. From suspended summits to treaty violations, from broken diplomatic protocols to international state showdowns, the rivalry now affects far more than just bilateral ties. This isn't just a regional squabble anymore. It has become an obstacle for international diplomacy itself. Can the global order afford this deadlock much longer? For decades, India and Pakistan's turbulent relationship has shaped geopolitics in South Asia. Rooted in the trauma of partition, 3 full-scale wars, and the unresolved status of Kashmir, as also terrorism that emanates from Pakistan, their enmity has persisted through ceasefires, dialogues, and nuclear deterrents. What began as a regional border dispute has gradually metastasized into a wider diplomatic fault line. The hostility now surfaces not just in New Delhi or Islamabad, but in New York, Geneva, Beijing, for that matter, many such important cities of the world. From trade to climate change, peacekeeping to counterterrorism, multilateral cooperation falters when the two sides refuse to cooperate. By 2025, their bilateral dysfunction began to consistently spill beyond borders. Military standoffs, diplomatic tit-for-tats, and narrative battles in international media have transformed this regional rivalry into a global diplomatic headache. And when they clash, it isn't just the region that suffers. The entire world takes notice.
Look, it's my belief that the global South's voice must be heard not just in multilateral fora, but it must be heard whenever there is a conflict of the kind that we've seen between Iran, Israel, Russia, Ukraine, and dare one say India, Pakistan. The global South must stand up in one voice, express their clarity of thought, so that the world takes notice. This is a world where every country is increasingly inward looking and looking at their national interest. In that situation, the global South must find a voice that reflects, in my view, a certain moral fiber, a moral compass, and thereby become a voice of reason. I mean, Gaza is a classic example. Why is the global South not speaking out forcefully as one? So it's not just India, Pakistan. It's just the unwillingness of the global South to look beyond their own limited, narrow national interest, which I think makes the body less effective in all multilateral fora.
Recent confrontations have repeatedly proven that de-escalation doesn't equal reconciliation. India unilaterally suspended the Indus Waters Treaty, a cornerstone of bilateral cooperation since 1960. This was no symbolic move. It affected water rights, agricultural planning, and international water law, forcing the World Bank, which oversees the treaty, into an uncomfortable spotlight. Diplomats were expelled, borders sealed, visas frozen. Pakistan retaliated by walking away from the Shimla Agreement, closing its airspace and halting trade routes. What remained of structured dialogue disappeared overnight. These weren't just political signals. They were systematic breakdowns that weakened trust and exhausted mechanisms meant to prevent war. SAARC, the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation, was conceived as a counterweight to division, aimed at fostering economic cooperation and cultural exchange. But since its inception, the India-Pakistan rivalry has reduced it to a glorified talking shop.
Oh, I think SARC has been completely hostage to the India-Pakistan conflict. And not just today, but that's happened for over a decade. And I think to a large extent, Pakistan is responsible for this. Pakistan cannot get away with sponsoring, the Pakistani state sponsoring terror against India and then expecting India to also be part of a regional cooperation. That duality no longer works. And because of the nature of SARC, where India was a dominant player, to expect India to revive SARC while Pakistan carries out the kind of activities it has over the years, it just makes an entire nonsense out of the whole notion of regional cooperation. The EU succeeded because the EU was able to find a common minimum agenda. Unfortunately, SARC has seen the rise of terror over the last couple of decades now, and it's reached a point where I don't think it really holds any meaning which can actually make a real difference to the idea of a South Asian brotherhood or sisterhood.
In the 2020s, SAARC became the clearest symbol of how a regional body can fail when its two biggest members are constantly at odds. Summits were indefinitely postponed, agendas hijacked, proposals watered down or vetoed. Even initiatives on health and disaster relief floundered when political bitterness took center stage. By 2025, SAARC wasn't just ineffective, it was invisible. No meetings, no decisions, no future. Unlike SAARC, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization includes powerful players like China and Russia, offering a broader base and firmer geopolitical weight. Yet, even within the SCO, India and Pakistan found new ways to undermine consensus.
Because as far as the SCO is concerned, SCO is much larger a grouping. SCO for the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, Russia, China are the more bigger player as far as the SCO mechanisms are concerned. And India and Pakistan, yes, they do have their own differences, but SCO can't be equated with the SARC. Because intrinsically, in the SARC, India and Pakistan were the lead countries that regional cooperation hinged upon their bilateral relation, and most of the other players were like much smaller as compared to India and Pakistan, be it Sri Lanka, be it Nepal, be it Bangladesh, and therefore the India-Pakistan differences dominated the regional cooperation or the idea of SARC itself. And in fact, the regional differences, the regional play of South Asia has actually, that competition of India and Pakistan marred that the very idea of SARC itself. But on the other side, since China, Russia and other players want to have the forward movement as far as the Shanghai Cooperation Organization is concerned, there could be one-off cases. And if you see, even at the time of India-Pakistan's membership in 2016 during the UFA conference of Shanghai Cooperation Organization, it was one of the laid down thing before these new member states that their regional differences, their bilateral differences should never be used, that never should hinder the regional cooperation apparatus. But it happens. We are living in a very fragile times. We are the entire global mechanism is marred with the differences. So much of conflicts are happening around. So and most of the global mechanisms, most of the regional cooperation organizations and mechanisms are getting impacted by the regional differences, by the bilateral conflicts. And that's why it is quite obvious to see the impact of India-Pakistan differences, especially after the Pahalgam terror attack. If such measures, if such events happen, then they have its own effect on any regional grouping, any regional cooperation. And this is not unique to SCO, but if you see the commitment of SCO is concerned, Prime Minister is also likely to visit SCO to China for the SCO summit, and that's why we have always shown our commitment for the SCO, and be it post Pahalgam, post Pulwama, we have attended these meetings, unlike the SARC, which turned out to be a non-mover or like a defunct organization. SCO is still functioning, so there is a difference, and we are yet to see that how regional cooperations work, and the efficiency will always be tested on ground, because India's concern on terrorism remains, and if SCO has RATS, regional anti-terror mechanism or regional anti-terror system, that has to deliver. And if it is not delivering, then if the key concern of any member state remain unfulfilled, they're unaddressed, then it becomes an issue.
At the 2025 Defence Ministers meeting of the SCO, a disagreement over language in the final joint statement, specifically India's insistence on naming cross-border terrorism, and rightly so, led to India refusing to sign the document. As a result, the statement couldn't be issued at all. Not to forget, Pakistan brought in Balochistan.
India's zero tolerance for terrorism is manifest today through its actions. This includes our right to defend ourselves against terrorism. And we have shown that epicenters of terrorism are no longer safe, and we will not hesitate to target them. We should also take proactive steps to prevent the spread of the radicalization among our youth. The RATS mechanism of SCO has played a significant role in this regard. The joint statement of the Council of SCO heads of state on countering radicalization leading to terrorism, separatism and extremism, issued during India's chairmanship, symbolizes our shared commitment. Excellencies, we should seek to counter the technology used by terrorists, including drones, for cross-border smuggling of weapons and drugs. In our interconnected world, traditional borders are no longer the sole barriers against threats, and instead we face an intricate web of challenges that range from translational terrorism and cyber attacks to hybrid warfare. These threats do not respect national boundaries, and they demand a unified response rooted in transparency, mutual trust and collaboration. India reaffirms its resolve to fight terrorism in all its forms and manifestations.
What should have been a united front against shared threats became another performance of bilateral hostility. Even China and Russia, seasoned at navigating conflict, were left red-faced. The UN has long been the global stage where India and Pakistan air their grievances. But in 2025, this platform became even more theatrical. As a non-permanent member of the Security Council, Pakistan called for closed-door consultations following India's military operations early in the year. Predictably, the session turned into a blame game. Pakistan accused India of aggression. India cited Pakistan's record of harboring terrorists. China took Islamabad's side. Western countries called for restraint, but stopped short of choosing sides. No resolutions were passed. No measures agreed. Another wasted hour of international diplomacy. It's not just treaties and summits that suffer. Cultural ties, arguably the most human element of diplomacy, often become the first to collapse. After each spike in tensions, the entertainment industry pays the price. Indian music platforms purge Pakistani songs. Films featuring Pakistani actors are shelved. Streaming services take down shows like Zindagi Gulzar Hai. Pakistan reciprocates by removing Indian songs from airwaves and cancelling Indian film screenings. Shared art becomes suspect. Creative collaboration is labelled betrayal. What could be a bridge becomes a border. In 2025, the information war extended deep into cyberspace. Indian authorities blocked dozens of Pakistani YouTube channels and social media accounts, citing misinformation and provocation, rightly so. Popular figures like Mahara Khan, Atif Aslam and many others who sided with the Pakistani military became invisible to Indian fans. Pakistan responded by banning Indian platforms and influencers. The internet, once hailed as a force for borderless dialogue, became yet another front in the rivalry. The people, more connected than ever, found their digital voices silenced by governments that fear each other more than they trust their citizens. Few rivalries in sport match, the drama of India versus Pakistan cricket, but what once served as a rare balm has now hardened into another cold front. There has been no bilateral series in over a decade. Pakistani players are banned from the Indian Premier League. Indian broadcasters avoid airing Pakistani leagues. Matches happen only under ICC banners, often in neutral countries. Even those fixtures are accompanied by security alerts, political statements, and media hysteria.
See, I mean, the truth of the matter is that India and Pakistan haven't engaged in bilateral ties for more than a decade now. They have been playing in multi-nation tournaments, but there's no bilateral relation when it comes to sport. But has that had desired results? You've still had Pahalgam, you've had Pulwama. My point being that I think you need to look at things that would really make an impact. I know terrorism is a problem, but are sporting and cultural ties in any way, or not having sporting and cultural ties in any way, going to be a deterrent for people who are behind this state-sponsored terrorism? And the answer to that, unfortunately, is no. The people that the ultra-nationalists or the terrorists that may be involved in certain attacks, they're not the ones that consume this cultural content. They're not the ones that watch these cricket matches. So what is it that you need to do? I think you need to do more at a diplomatic level. Now, there is of course this argument that stop playing Pakistan even in multi-nation tournaments. Is that really a possibility? It isn't, unfortunately. Recently you had the Champions Trophy that was to be held in Pakistan, and India did try their level best to ensure that the tournament doesn't happen in Pakistan, but they could not succeed simply because the rest of the countries decided to play that tournament in Pakistan. So you cannot be fighting a lone battle. You need people to come on the same page as you. I'll give you other sporting examples. You've had people boycott the 1980 Moscow Olympics. You've had in certain times where South Africa was boycotted in cricket, but the difference there being the rest of the world got together and ensured that South Africa was boycotted, or the rest of the world got together and ensured that Russia does not participate. Even now, in the scenario that we live in, the Western world is together to ensure that Russian players, when they play Grand Slam in tennis, cannot play with a Russian flag. But how has that happened? That's happened at a diplomatic level. That is when you've got other countries together. We find a scenario where right now Pakistan is the vice chair in the United Nations Security Council. You have a scenario where the World Bank ends up giving loans to Pakistan. You have a scenario where countries like China, Azerbaijan, Turkey all end up supporting Pakistan. The point is, how do you isolate Pakistan? And I think more needs to be done at a diplomatic level rather than a sporting or a cultural level. What are we going to do next? I think China is a major adversary to India at the moment. Are we going to stop playing China, let's say a Chinese badminton match when it comes to, because at the end of the day, may not be directly, but indirectly, China somewhere supports Pakistan. You have the Chinese jets taking on the Indian jets. So are you going to do this at the Olympic game? And if you are up against a Chinese athlete, the Indian athlete pulls out. And if that happens, there will be repercussions for Indian athletes, because the rest of the world will continue having China in the Olympics. Or Turkey, what if an Indian wrestler comes up against a Turkish wrestler? Turkey, the country that backed Pakistan in the recent skirmish. So I think you need to have a more practical, a pragmatic look when you look at cultural as well as sporting issues. And at the end of the day, I think, as I mentioned, you need to look at the thing that will make an impact. Sport and culture does not. And the other thing is eventually allow the citizens to take that call. If people don't want to see a Pakistani actress in a film, they will not watch that film. If people don't want to see an India-Pakistan game, they will not watch that game. I don't think in a mature democracy, you can actually be schooling the citizen what they need to do. The desired results will only happen, as I said, when you isolate Pakistan, and that cannot happen by this, I would call it tokenism, when you don't play a sporting match with them or don't watch a film with a Pakistani actress.
Multilateral institutions increasingly find themselves dragged into bilateral skirmishes. India's push to revoke the Indus Waters Treaty put the World Bank as the treaty's broker in an impossible position. Pakistan's lobbying to revisit Financial Action Task Force, that is the FATF, grey listing, led to global debates not about terrorism financing, but about whether geopolitics had infected regulatory bodies. Each nation attempts to dominate the narrative, India positioning itself as a victim of terror, Pakistan as a victim of regional bullying. The result: deadlocks, vetoes, and uncomfortable silences in global chambers. When countries walk away from the very treaties meant to prevent escalation, what remains? The Indus Waters Treaty, once celebrated for surviving multiple wars, has now been held in abeyance. Shimla Agreement, which outlined peaceful resolution paths, has been officially abandoned by Pakistan. Arbitration is unlikely. Both nations have restricted access to international courts. Without legal guardrails, diplomatic potholes become sinkholes, and no outside actor can enforce accountability. Global legal norms, like global institutions, find themselves powerless in the face of hardened bilateral disdain. As the global south becomes more prominent in international politics, India and Pakistan's rivalry risks splitting its potential. India presents itself as a rising democratic power and economic powerhouse. Pakistan counters with the narrative of injustice and marginalization. These conflicting visions divide allies, distract summits, and distort priorities. Instead of working together on climate finance, regional infrastructure, or digital cooperation, South Asia's giants wage rhetorical war. Global South unity suffers when its two largest South Asian members can't even agree on common definitions of peace. Beyond diplomatic awkwardness lies a bigger danger: lost opportunity. South Asia, with its massive population and potential, remains one of the least integrated regions economically. Trade between India and Pakistan is negligible, travel restricted, knowledge exchange nearly extinct. Every time a cricket series is cancelled or a summit falls apart, it's not just symbolism that's lost, it's livelihoods, learning, and leverage on the global stage. The rivalry doesn't just produce hostility, it produces stagnation, and the entire region pays the price. 2025 reminded the world of something inconvenient. South Asia's volatility isn't just regional, it's global. When India and Pakistan clash, international forums stall, trade gets disrupted, diplomacy takes a backseat, cultural exchange collapses, global institutions scramble to adapt, climate goals are delayed, regional cooperation is shelved. Neither India nor Pakistan stands to gain from these cycles. But neither seems willing or able to break them either. Their rivalry is no longer just bilateral. It's structural, embedded into how the world navigates peace and crisis in South Asia. So here's the thing. If two neighbors can't even agree on music, movies, or cricket, what hope is there for lasting peace? Thank you for watching Statecraft.